So this month we're kicking off a campaign called A Place for You. And the line that goes with that is growing God's family together. The beautiful thing about what God has done here, one of the many things here at Church of the Rock, is that 24 years ago, we started, those of us who were here, a few of us that are still here, were able to be part of seeing God build this room that we're in. And I just want you to know that we didn't know it would happen. It just seemed something too big, too far beyond anything we could imagine. But God's people pitched together, and we were able to see this building go up, and people began to come, and the dream that we had is being fulfilled right now, that you're here. Now, some of us are here from before, but the whole new you found a place. Not just the folks who were here in St. Albans or at Church of the Rock 20-some years ago. Well, now, as you know, we're at a point where the furniture is getting shabby. Some of the pews are rock and roll pews now, and they actually are really in need of being replaced. The carpet is well beyond its sell date, and so the campaign is going to focus on just refurbishing this particular place that we share so that we can be part of welcoming another 20 years of people into God's house to be part of this church family. And so I just want you to just be thinking about the fact that probably for virtually everyone in the room here, not all of you, but most of you are the beneficiaries of someone else daring to take that journey and say, I want to be part of something bigger. I want to be part of something God is doing to welcome another generation of people, old, young, from other parts of the country, from St. Albans or Franklin County. Welcome them into this church family. We're going to kick off on the 15th, and so at that time we're going to be handing you a pledge card and asking you to take that home and pray about it. And basically we're going to be looking to raise $220,000. It'll be articulated on that card what those various items are for, but it will be for pews, for carpet, and for sound system, so that we can basically sort of do the whole package at one time. We really have no choice about the carpet and the pews. In order to do the carpet, you have to pick up the pews, and we don't want to pick up the bad old pews and put them back down on new carpet. And so we're going to be just bringing this before you. I want to give you a heads up. On the 29th, we will collect the cards, or at least begin collecting them, and we will be taking an offering at that time, and then we'll do so on a regular basis, probably once a month or so, throughout the winter, so that we can just watch God provide. But it's going to be as He speaks to you, and more important than money, more important than pews, carpets, wiring, circuit boards, more important than all of that by a million miles are people, and that's why we do this. So that's why we've titled the campaign A Place for You. Because it's not about stuff. It's about just having a place where people can come, can feel welcome, can do the many things that happen in church, and can most of all discover the Lord. And for that reason, these sermons that we're speaking to you about are not all about furniture, but they're really all about what it means to be God's people living together, working together. Now, this morning I want to talk to you about what I would call the real thing. I think for Paul, this is the one thing he came back to over and over and over again. The bottom line of why we're Christians, what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a place for you. And I want to start out by talking about something that's going to happen this coming March, as it happens every early March. This March, on March 4th, I believe it is, will be the 90th time that Hollywood gathers to hand out the coveted Oscar awards. And once again, the limos are going to pull up to the Dolby Theater. The stars will walk the red carpet. Everybody will be taking their pictures, analyzing what they wore and whether or not they look as good as they did last year. And then a few hours later, a few of those stars will go home with one of those gold statues in their hands, and their names in the record books for being Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Supporting, whatever the case might be. Basically reaching the epitome, perhaps, of their entire acting career. Well, the Oscars may be 90 years old, but the tradition of awarding a prize to the best actor goes back, believe it or not, over 2,500 years. Now, the first Best Actor award went to a Greek actor, and his name was Thespis. Now, if that word sounds vaguely familiar to those of you who are into acting, Thespis is where we get the name thespian, which is a kind of classy name for actors. And Thespis won the competition in Athens, the very first recorded competition for best actor in the whole world, back in 534 BC. And Thespis is credited not only with winning best actor, but also with creating a whole new style of acting, in which one person performed not one role, but many different roles in the course of a particular play. To do so, he wore masks. He put on a different mask for each character, probably changed his voice a little bit, may have taken on a different costume. One mask for each part that he was playing. Thespis' new approach to acting caught on so quickly that it spread throughout all of the ancient world. Actors wore elaborate masks, complete with wigs, with hair, and they had comedy masks, they had tragedy masks, masks representing men, women, the gods, animals, other mythological figures. They had all sorts of masks, as you can see, some of these that come to us from ancient times. It's even thought that the shape of the mouth of the mask served as an amplifier, sort of like a little megaphone to cause their voice to carry out into those huge theaters that the Greek cities built. The Greeks had a special word for these mask-wearing actors. They called them hypocrites. That was not a pejorative term in referring to the actor, because they were speaking from under. They were speaking from under, behind the mask. But of course, the word hypocrite soon took on some darker meanings. It came to describe someone not only who was an actor on the stage, perhaps the most famous person in town with their masks coming and going, but it came to describe someone who pretends to be one kind of person while actually being quite different. And it's a word that Jesus used with great force to describe the self-righteous religious experts of his time. They professed moral purity. They had the mask that said that they were perfectly in tune with everything that God had commanded, when actually, he says, they were guilty of the very things that they were accusing others of doing. They were phonies. They were hiding their true selves behind a mask of religious piety and virtue. They were acting a part. And in writing to the Christians in Rome, where, of course, there were many theaters and where people were very familiar with this style of acting, Paul warns against such play acting. In Romans 12, verse 9, the first little sentence says this: love must be sincere. Now, the word that's translated sincere in your Bible is actually the Greek word not hypocrite. Not a hypocrite. Love must be non-hypocritical. Our love towards others, in other words, Paul's saying, is never to be an act. It's not to be something we pretend to be doing while our real motives are quite the opposite. Paul says, don't put on the love mask and pretend to love your neighbor. Take off the mask and love your neighbor with a sincere and pure heart. That's what he means when he says love must be sincere. The truth is that if we're honest, if we take off our mask for a moment, we each one have a closet full of masks, don't we? Whether we want to admit it or not. We've probably learned how to wear those masks from the time we were about 2 years old, and we figured out that certain facial expressions got us better treatment than other ones, or certain facial expressions backed people off, and we learned how to make our face and our words and our actions into a mask that might or might not be saying the same thing that was going on in here. In fact, wearing masks is part of everyday life. In a world where everyone is wearing a mask, it's pretty dangerous to be the only one who isn't wearing a mask. So what would it look like to do a day without the mask? What would it look like to take off the masks of our own making, to allow the face of Jesus to shine into our world? What would it be like to stop play acting and to start actually living out what it means to be renewed in the image, the face, the picture, the glory of our Creator? Pretty dangerous question. I know when I think about it, my first thought is, well, if people really knew what I was thinking, that would not be good. I think the mask is preferable to what's really going on in here sometimes. You know, that, hi, how are you? Is there a better way? Is there a better way? Is it possible that we could do what Paul is saying? Or are the masks the best we have? Do the masks prevent us from blowing our world up entirely? I'm sure Paul is not saying that when I get up in the morning, I'm to just simply let my wife have it with everything in my mind and say, well, he said to be honest. He told me not to pretend. That's not what Paul's saying, is it? Because he says love must be sincere. He's not saying you must be brutally, bluntly honest with everyone and don't worry about how much damage you do. He's saying, no, when you go to show and experience and portray the love of God coming out of your life, you don't want to adulterate it with anything else. It has to be completely pure. The essence of being a hypocrite is that we mingle the good with the bad. We kind of mix them. The mask smiles while the mind is stewing on past hurts. We offer our love to a friend or a spouse, but it's laced with selfish expectations. We justify jealousy or a controlling spirit by saying, well, it's just that I love you so much. Paul says there is no place for anything that adulterates or contaminates God's love shining through us. Love must be 100% pure. Listen to how he puts it in Romans 12, verse 9, the second half of the verse. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. He's saying when you go to express love to each other, when you live in this world and you are empowered by God's love, you have to make sure that what you are showing and demonstrating, what comes out of you, is 100% pure, not simply cut down the way the love or the courtesy or the friendship or even the caring happens to be in the world in which we live. We live in a rough world. And I would have to say that I've seen the world become more coarse and more harsh, even in the last 10, 15 years than what we could have even imagined. When I was a young person, I used to get in trouble for saying things that people now tweet off without any kind of compunction whatsoever. We live in a world that's really becoming harder and harder to even be a nice person in. And here's Paul, who was also in a rough and tumble world. I mean, the world of the city of Rome was probably something like the New York of today, where, you're going to get your feelings hurt if you wear them on your sleeve. But Paul says, look, we're called to something higher. We're called to let God's good and pure and perfect love shine through us. He says, hate what is evil, cling to what is good. You see, we make a fateful choice when we choose to wear a mask. However noble our motives or how pure our theology, the mask makes room in our hearts for something less than God's pure love. It gives us wiggle room. The mask allows us to give less than 100% to another person. We can retrain our true self hidden by the mask's smile. We can cling to hurt. We can cling to anger. We can cling to unforgiveness or prejudice or pride. We can cling to what is evil while masquerading as a loving, caring friend. And it's only when we dare to take off the mask that God's love can shine into us and into our relationships. Now, what kind of love is this that we're talking about? Well, it's the love that comes directly from God himself. The only place you're going to find 100% pure love is from him. You know how John talks about perfect love. A perfect love casts out fear. He says there's no fear in love. And just understand, as I share this with you, as Paul's talking to us, he does not expect you to have this in yourself. None of us, Paul included, are perfect and are perfectly formed in God's love as we go through this life. We've all been contaminated, and we all continue to reach for the mask almost instinctively without even realizing that we're doing so. So if we're going to talk about love that is sincere, love that is not hypocritical, if we're going to hate what is evil and cling to what is good and end up with this 100% pure love, it's going to have to come not from us, but from God. What's this love look like? Well, Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 and following, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Sort of saying the same thing, isn't he? Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Think about that description. And then think about what it's like to be in a stressful situation, in a relationship with someone else. See how impossible that is if we're going to do this on our own strength? Love never fails. My love fails. Love keeps no record of wrongs. I can remember a few wrongs. Love never envies. Really? Well, I've seen a house I like, or a car I like, or a this or a that or the next thing. I've wondered why that didn't happen for me. Self-seeking? Sometimes I'm more interested in what I want than what the other person wants. I mean, we do not read those verses and simply go, yeah, that's me. Doesn't work like that. This is something that can only come from God, because this is the literal oxygen of God's new creation. If you ever want to know what heaven, what the new creation, what the new reality is going to be like after we've finished this life and God has raised us from the dead and we're in his kingdom, read those verses, because that's all that will be there. That's how the world will be, because we're going to be in him, and this is what God is. If you want a description of God, wonder what God's like. Well, let me just tell you. God is patient. God is kind. God does not envy. He does not boast. He is not proud. God doesn't dishonor others. God is not self-seeking. God is not easily angered. He keeps no record of wrongs. See, this is who God is. And so when Paul says, this is the love that's to come out of it, he's saying, you better get in touch with the source and allow God to bring that into your life. Now, the secret to finding this kind of love, this 100% pure love that comes from God and that can shine into our world, the secret to it has to do with taking off the ultimate mask. And that's the mask we wear for God. If you think we're good at finding masks for our interactions with each other, what about when it comes to relating to God? Did you know that we have masks for God? I've talked to people, I wouldn't dare ask God for that because I don't feel I should be praying for myself. Mask, see? I can't let him see who I really am. You got some deep, dark hurt, and you're afraid that if I ever really talk to God about it, he would smite me. See, we've got a mask up. Or how about it goes the other way, where we've got so much under control that we really don't need any help. We've got our, I'm as good as you mask, Lord. We have these barriers that prevent God from shining his light and his glory, his presence into us. And I think those masks that we use in our relationship with him are probably masks that we learned at home and masks that we learned in the busyness of life. Is it okay to be angry with God? No hands. Did you ever tell God off? Oh, I would never do that. Were you ever angry at God? Well, yeah, but even that can be a mask. This sort of being hypocritical toward Him. When maybe the best thing would be to do what David did and put it all out there and say, this is how I feel right now. I don't see how this is working. In a real relationship, you can be real. And Paul talks about what it's like to actually take our mask off in our relationship with God. And he uses a different word, but listen to what he says in 2 Corinthians 3:18. And we all, who with unveiled faces, contemplate or reflect the Lord's glory, are being transformed into His image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. The picture here is of God's image, His face, His person, just His personality, shining on another person so that they are changed. But he says it can only happen if you take off the mask, if you take off the veil, whatever it is that filters that presence of the other person. I've found, I know in my own relationships, that I've been around someone who I admired perhaps, and maybe I wanted to be like that person, and yet if I had a mask up, maybe of feeling inferior or being afraid or whatever, I could never let them in. I suppose that probably is one of the big things that I worked on for the first, 10, 20 years of my marriage. Married to this wonderful person that God put in my life so that I could become more like Jesus. And yet, all the insecurities and the questions and the fears and sort of hesitate, and I don't want to admit to her that I feel this or that or whatever. And yet when those masks come down, God can shine through her into my life and I'm changed. And the same can be true with various people in our lives, even more so in our time directly with Him. But it only happens when we take off the mask. When I was a kid, my dad taught me how to print pictures. Now, this goes back to way before digital cameras and digital printers. This is back when you actually had a film. There actually was such a thing, some of you didn't know. Film, and you took a picture, and on the picture was a reverse image, a negative of what you took the picture of. And so you would take that and you would either send it off to a lab, or my dad taught me how to put the negative in a thing called a projector. And then you got a special piece of paper, which was sensitive to light, and you put that underneath the projector. Now, in order for this all to work, you first of all had to have a perfectly dark room. Guess what we called the room? The dark room. Pretty smart, right? Any contaminating light coming in was going to fall on that paper and expose it, and then it would have black streaks on it or whatever. So this had to be a 100% pure environment here. I mean, you'd run around with tape, and there were no cracks. There was nothing. When you got in there, we had a red light that we could turn on because that didn't light up the paper, but other than that, it was dark. And then you put the piece of paper in and had a foot pedal, and you push the pedal and count so many seconds and expose that paper to the image that was on the film. And because of the nature of the paper, a chemical reaction took place whereby the chemicals in the paper responded to the light that had struck it. And when you put it in a certain chemical, you could literally stand there and watch a blank piece of paper slowly become the picture. Not now a little tiny reverse negative, but a great big picture, everything that you hoped it would be. And I remember standing there watching as it would get darker and darker and darker until it was just right, and then you take it out and finish the process. Now, if you didn't want a part of the picture to be exposed, you'd get a piece of paper like a card and you would wave it over that part so the image couldn't land there as powerfully. You know what we called that? masking. Masking. And so any place that you masked didn't get exposed, or didn't get exposed as well to that final image. And you see, you and I are God's photographic paper. And over the course of our lives, His desire is to take us and to light us up with the unfiltered, unmasked image of Himself, what it truly means to be a human being with love that's sincere. What comes out of that projector when God shines on us is the real deal. It's the real thing. And He wants to shine that on us. And then through the power of His Spirit, He wants to let us become that picture in this world. What does God look like? How does Jesus respond? What kind of words would the Spirit of God say into a situation? He chose you, and He chose me to be that image, that picture in this world. I suppose, if I even can remember it, one of my first questions when I get into His presence will be, how did you think that was actually going to work? we were so messed up. And then his answer was going to be, I wasn't going to use the old you at all. I was going to pull a new sheet of paper out of the drawer and make a brand new picture. But only if we take off the mask. That's all we have to do, is take off the mask. Particularly the mask that we wear when we go into His presence. A place for you means being a community of people who let God do that. Who say, go ahead, Lord, transform me. I'm willing to learn to take off the mask. Willing to experience your love. It means dropping our masks and letting God's love shine into our hearts. It means keeping those same masks off so that His love can shine into the lives of others. Paul says in Romans 12:10, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Here he's talking to a group just like us. Little churches in Rome, and little churches anywhere. He's saying, this is what it's going to be like. When this love is genuine, you're going to care about each other. You're going to honor each other. I know for me, the small group that I'm a part of on Thursday night is really where we do this. It's true, isn't it? We're learning to take some masks off. And sometimes people share things that I'm like, wow. Because there's enough trust built over a year now, and enough love that we can do this journey together. It's an amazing, transforming thing. I hope the same thing will happen for you. I hope maybe for some of you to come to next steps, you're going to find, not that we're going to have you come in and everybody tell your dark secrets. No. But that we can start a process where God begins to grow that image as we begin to maybe dare to build some relationships where we can take off the masks in a loving environment where He is present, and then really take steps to become the person God meant for us to be. As we build a place for you, it's going to be a place where others are going to come. And the deepest desire I have is that they'd be able to come in and say, I feel accepted. Whether or not I believe what these people believe, whether or not I'm living the way they say we're supposed to live, I still feel accepted. There's something here, I don't know what it is. It's some kind of love that's here that I don't find anywhere else. A place for you. And if, helping out, making new pews available and new carpets and having hot coffee and having a place where your kids are safe and loved and cared for, and all these little things are all part of that. Then God can do the big stuff. God can let us learn to drop our masks, to hate what is evil, to cling to what is good. And the world will catch a glimpse of the God who made them. Let's bow our heads together. And I ask the worship team to come up. And those that are serving the Lord's table this morning, please come at this time. If there ever was a time when God dropped all the masks, it was on the night that Jesus went to the cross. And before he went, he showed his disciples, John says he showed them the full extent of his love. In that room when Jesus washed the disciples' feet and when he took the bread and he said, "This is my body which is for you." I mean, how real is that? And this is my blood which is poured out for you. Jesus was showing them the very depths of his own heart and his own soul. No pretense, no acting, no rah, 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 but inside a whole different set of motivations. This was God being real with people. Jesus was showing us how we can be people without a mask. And so as we come to the table this morning, this is our chance to take our mask off toward him and just say, "Thank you, Lord." As broken and as messed up as I might be, as confused or as afraid as I might be, whatever my situation, you're right here with me. You accept me right where I am, and I'm accepting you. No masks.